Good morning. It's not quite 9 o'clock, but looks like everybody is here and ready to go. So we will start. First of all, you'll notice that we got all of our board members here for this meeting. That's great. Normally expect that to happen, but sometimes people can't be here. You'll also notice that we have substantially reduced the age distribution of our group and the beauty of our group by adding a student member. Our new student member is Lauren Haley. Lauren is a senior at Bartlett High School. She's been involved in all kinds of honor courses at Bartlett. She's currently taking AP English, AP Economics, AP Government, so really involved in the academic side of the program. She's also heavily involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. She was chair of the prom committee last year, and involved in a lot of other extracurricular activities. She plans to pursue a career in nursing. She's going to get a BS in nursing and then continue with that, get an MS and be a nurse practitioner. So Lauren, certainly welcome you to the board. We appreciate you being here. We have got a number of modifications we need to make in the agenda for our meeting today. The first item is that we will remove from the agenda items 4, G, and H. The original intent of items 4, G, and H was to have an opportunity to protect teachers who we need to take some action on, but did not justify suspension or revocation of their license. In a number of cases, we are by law required to take action, licensure action. In some cases, we don't feel that it's appropriate to suspend or revocate a license, and right now we have no way to do that. So at our workshop, the last meeting, we talked about this, and the intent of G and H was to provide that opportunity to protect teachers, to keep them in the classroom instead of suspending or revoking a license. Unfortunately, we had some talking points go out to teachers across the state that was very inflammatory. I think was very misleading in terms of the intent of items G and H. And we, caused a great deal of concern amongst teachers throughout the state, caused them to write a lot of emails. I guess I personally received something like 100 emails that obviously most had spent a lot of time in composing and writing using these talking points that went out. So we need to continue with the intent of what we were trying to do, but we will remove it from the agenda this time. We'll take some time and make sure that we communicate, that we've got it clearly understood, the reason for this and what we're doing. We'll work some on the terminology, and we will be bringing it back to the next meeting. But hopefully we will solicit the help of teachers across the state in making sure that we have improved the understanding, the intent of this, so we do protect teachers, that we keep them in the classroom instead of being required to suspend the license or revoke the license in cases that don't deserve that action. So we will remove items G and H. We will also add item 3C, which is a new item to the agenda that was originally distributed. So with those modifications to the agenda and the minutes, we've got those under the consent items. Is there a motion that we approve the revised agenda and the minutes of the November 4th and December 19th meeting? Got a motion, second? Got a second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll now move to the report items on the agenda. The first is the Tennessee Council on Career and Technical Education biannual report. And Tom, you're going to present that?
Thank you to the board. There you go. This is the biennial report that the council does periodically to study the delivery of CTE both at the secondary and post-secondary levels, and provide data that we now have over the last 6 years, and be able to draw some conclusions and some look at trends that may be happening in CTE. And this is for your information and for your perusal.
Okay, questions? Questions for Tom concerning the report you have? Guess, Tom, one question I had in looking at the report, you've cited in there a graduation rate of 90% for CTE students. How was that calculated? What methodology was used to calculate that?
We use the data that the state provides. We collect that, or CTE collects that for the Perkins report card, and that is what this is. CTE concentrators. We do not follow the students that are taking CTE just a one-time course. We have over 80% of the students in high school take one CTE course, but the only data that we actually capture and follow are for CTE concentrators.
Okay. Any question, Mike?
The only thing I would ask is that as you develop curriculum, to keep in mind that none of these jobs remain the same, and that they're going to constantly change and evolve, and that probably the most important core is the transferable skills that they can continue. You're preparing them to skill up the rest of their life, because they got to be able to learn.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions, comments from the board? Okay, this is a report item. Tom, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next is the report on student, teacher, and school performance. Dr. David.
Thank you, Chair and members. You had the opportunity to hear a pretty detailed presentation on this yesterday, so I won't go into too many numbers. I would just remind the board that this generally serves in many cases as a lagging indicator of the implementations of programs and renewals and reforms that are currently underway. So, I think it's really, even though last year was actually our baseline year, you really do have to take that in the spirit of several baseline years. We have seen increase in some areas, market increase, especially in a couple areas around mathematics, and that's a tremendous benefit to our students, and a salute to our teachers who need to be rewarded for that. And we are very proud of that work. I would just point out that we expect to see these numbers increase, and I heard what you said yesterday regarding monitoring certain markers, especially around our NAEP comparisons, and we will take that to heart as a staff and continue to monitor that and intervene in ways we can. And I'll happily answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for David on the report? Any questions? I might just add that I think this is a tremendously important document. I think it is one that we really use to identify where we need to go and what progress we're making on getting there. I don't think we can underestimate the challenge that is incorporated in some of the targets that we've got set out here, and the one that I like to continue to highlight is the ACT college readiness benchmarks that we've identified here, and the objectives or the targets that we've set up. And if we can get to the 80% of our students meeting those college readiness benchmarks in each of the 4 areas by the 2019-20 year, I think it is going to be a tremendous accomplishment, and I think this really does a great job of identifying the game plan that we need to be working on. So very, very important report. Any questions? Okay, David, thank you, sir.
You.
Appreciate it. And just for the audience to know, we spent an awful lot of time looking at this yesterday. There are some areas in here where we've still got to be determined as far as the benchmarks are concerned. We will be working on those, and certainly by the time we look at this report again, we will have some targets identified for those things. Okay, next report item is the status of minority classroom teachers, and Morgan's here and going to present that. Morgan, welcome.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you. In compliance with House Joint Resolution 36, which requires a submission of a minority teacher status report, you have that report in front of you. Over the past years, we have increased the number of minority classroom teachers in the state, and that's through the efforts of the Department of Education, local school systems, colleges and universities, and other partners. We also have one of our big goals in the last time was our data reporting. Our data reporting has become more accurate. In 2006, we had about 18% of the teachers saying that they did not declare a raise. This year, it's down to about 5% and 9%. So we're making efforts in this area. Are there any questions?
Okay, questions for Morgan on the minority classroom teacher report?
Where are you seeing the most growth in adding to the minority teachers in the classroom? Are you seeing it in any particular region, or?
I haven't looked at the data that carefully as yet. By the way, you also will be getting a report in November, because this has been a long time coming. So we're looking for an update in November.
Morgan, in about I guess maybe a couple of sentences, how would you summarize the results of the report? What, if you look back over our experience in the last 10 years or so in this area, how would you summarize?
Well, in '96, when I first started doing this, we were in a decline for as minority teachers, and through the efforts of the joint THAC and the TSAC with the Minority Teaching Fellows Program and so forth, and the other partners like Teach Tennessee and the base, we've recruited more teachers into. We still have some areas where we have trouble hiring minority teachers, especially in small systems.
Okay, I think that kind of sums up my conclusion too. In looking at it, that we've made good progress, but we've still got a long way to go, a lot of opportunities to make further improvements in this area.
And also, although the law just states African American teachers, I have included other ethnic and racial demographics in the report.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. Okay, the next item is the annual joint report on pre-K through higher education Tennessee, and Art is going to present that. While Art is coming to the podium here, let me express the extreme appreciation of this board for Art's work over the last 11 years or so. Not quite that long, I guess 9 years. My math is failing me here, 9 years. Art has done a great job for the staff. He's decided to move to a CEO of a charter school, and he'll be doing that here in the next couple of months. And Art, we want to wish you all the best, and we certainly appreciate your knowledge and expertise. You know, we spent some time yesterday talking about the BEP, and again, we're losing some of our knowledge base on the BEP. So we really appreciate your work and want to wish you the best for your new endeavor. We'll be watching closely how this charter school does.
I really appreciate that, Fielding, and it really has been a great pleasure to work with all members of the board. You have an excellent executive director. He is a pleasure to work with, and the best thing about it is he lets you explore the areas that you're interested in and grow and develop. And I wouldn't be pursuing the endeavor that I have now without that freedom working with Gary.
Great. Thank you, Art.
To the joint report. Yesterday we spent a good deal of time hearing a lot of the exciting partnerships that are occurring, especially related to Race to the Top. Those types of partnerships are what are included in this report, and I'm going to briefly kind of go over what the four main areas are and then open it up for questions. So this is a report required by statute, and the first section of the report is really dealing with duplication in elementary and post-secondary. And you'll notice in that section of the report, which begins on page 1, this is where you'll find a lot of the initiatives where there's a high degree of collaboration between higher ed and the K-12 Department of Education State Board. Some of those collaborations include data integrations with the report card, or the teacher training report card on effectiveness of teacher training programs, a longitudinal data analysis database. There's a lot of focus on the Common Core standards, making sure that we're going to be preparing our schools as we transition to that in the upcoming years. And also you'll remember from yesterday's presentation some of the exciting work related to developmental studies and really trying to transform that area. So that's really communicated in the first section of the report. The second section actually has to deal kind of like with the transition from high school to college. One of the actions that the board took in April is trying to really clarify if you're a high school student and you have actually completed a college level course, streamlining that process for you to get high school credit, as long as that was not specifically related to areas that were associated with No Child Left Behind. So it begins to reflect some of that work. The third section of the report relates to the master plans. And as I had mentioned yesterday, State Board's in the process of kind of updating its master plan to closely align with the strategic plan that the Department of Education has put in place. And then the very last section of the report is really incorporates a lot of the information that you just heard from Dr. Sevier with the student performance report. So that is a general overview of what the report provides, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for Art on the joint report. Said we spent some time on this yesterday again, and I think have been through it pretty thoroughly. Any additional questions? Okay, very good. Thank you, Art.
Yep.
We'll now move to the action items on first reading. The first is special education programs and services. I have a rule here. Danielle, you going to do that?
Yes, I'm happy to. Good morning, board members. We have before us the Special Education Programs and Services Rule. The U.S. Department of Education released their final implementing regulations for IDA Part C programs, and the Tennessee Department of Education convened a task force that pretty much determined that we would just incorporate those rules by reference into our rules.
Okay. Any questions on this item? Okay. If not, is there a motion we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Any questions or discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Danielle. Okay. Next, we'll move to the school bus specifications, and Art said that Gary had provided him a great deal of latitude, and one of those latitudes is to work on school bus specifications. So, again, this is an area that we're going to lose Art's expertise.
I'll just one story I was sharing with you last night. I knew I had made it to the school bus arena when I started receiving school bus parts in the mail from various providers. So that is something I truly will miss.
You put that in your trophy case.
That's right. Yeah. But this is the 2012 Tennessee school bus specification. And just to give you a general overview, there are really kind of three major changes, and one of them has a fiscal impact. So if you turn on the cover page to the back of the cover page, What we are doing, as we normally do, we are basically adopting the recommendations from the School Bus Advisory Panel. And within the national standards, there's the requirement for fire retardant seat covers. And so we have an estimate of what the fiscal impact of that will be for the various size buses. So it's and again, these are for buses with the body build date after July 1, 2012. So this is not impacting in any way the existing fleet of buses. It's moving forward, and that range is anywhere from $370 to $470 per bus, and a bus is going to cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. So it's a small expense. In addition to that, there have been some recommendations about requiring a document holder on the buses so that it's very easy to retrieve that information. And in some cases, what the Department of Safety has seen is in some of the school districts may have been installing additional pieces to the buses in the windshield area that did not come as manufactured. And so this is prohibiting that, making sure the bus driver has maximum viewing radius on that front windshield. And that is a general summary of the school bus specification.
Okay, any questions for Art? Is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Art. Appreciate it. Next item is the item we've added, item 3C, move on when ready. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. TCA 496-8303 is the Move On When Ready Act. It was approved last year and begins in the 2012-13 year. This act allows certain students to finish their high school education at perhaps the end of the junior year and move on into the post-secondary component. You have a listing on the second page of the requirements. In the requirements, the state board is charged to do three things. One is to look at the end-of-course tests in high school and determine the benchmark score that would be needed for students to qualify. Second would be to determine which world language exams they should take, and the third would be to determine the benchmark for qualification on those world language exams. In this action item, the state board staff is recommending to you that the benchmark for end-of-course test would be at the advanced level, and that the world language exams be the advanced placement exams that we're all familiar with, and the benchmark score on the advanced placement exam would be a 3 or better. A component that's also requires THEC to set the AP benchmark, and they set that yesterday at 27 in language arts and math. The Act directs the state board and THEC to set these benchmark scores at a level which gives us confidence that if and when they move on into the post-secondary, they have a real strong chance of being successful. And we believe our recommendation does that.
Okay, questions for Gary?
This doesn't take away from some students can early graduate going the O way.
That's correct.
It doesn't replace that.
That's correct. Okay. They may still earn the 22 credits and meet all the requirements and graduate early.
Gary, are we progressing towards students spending 3 years in high school? I'm talking about, exceptional students, and then moving into a college environment.
I believe that's certainly a direction we're moving for some students.
Yes, I understand it would be certainly a small number. My concern about that, and we've looked at that, some of the stuff that we do, are we addressing this issue of maturity and social advancement and so forth to where we feel okay about that? I personally have always felt that if we can move a student into college at the age of 16, for example, or 17, a year earlier than typically they would, in a sense, it just kind of adds a year for them for professional accomplishments and all of these things. It takes away a year of high school social activities, and that's another argument where that's a positive or negative. But is there enough evidence there that we feel confident that if academically we can prepare a student to be in college at, well, I think I was in college at 17, say 16, that we're okay moving them maybe away from home, probably away from home, maybe into a dormitory. Are we taking that as we kind of head down this road? Are we giving proper study to that?
Two thoughts along those lines. One, over my career, I've had a handful of students who have asked to do this, and we have counseled individually with parents and students and talked about the maturity level of being able to handle the post-secondary environment. So I think the answer there is as a general rule, no, we don't have a body of evidence that makes us feel good. I think we have to do that on a case-by-case basis, individual student, one by one, meet with parents and give them your best opinion, but yet at the end of the day, it's their call. Now, the second thought is if I look back at the law that passed in Arizona around this topic, it's a little different, and it shifts the focus from earning credits to earning mastery of content. And they would demonstrate their readiness through an assessment that Arizona has, and they want a lot of their students to demonstrate that mastery by the end of the 10th grade. But they allow them to stay in high school for the 11th grade and the 12th grade, but they enroll them full-time in post-secondary work, early enrollment while they're in high school, which lets them get the social exposure, be the cheerleader, be on football, basketball, band, go to the prom, do all the things that a typical high school student would do, and then leave high school with 2 years of post-secondary behind them. I think that is a very solid approach.
Well, I do too. The thing that occurs to me, though, a lot of the smaller schools probably are not going, unless you can do something online or something, are probably not going to be able to offer those courses.
I think there's an opportunity online anymore. It's post-secondary opportunities there.
I mean, personally, I'm all for it, and just the way I think is, hey, that gives them a one-year start on life, professional advancement, achievements, adult-type achievements. I'm talking about getting a good job, making good money, getting experience in the workplace. But it's always been a concern of the Ayers Foundation and of myself personally, how much do we advocate that? And if we don't kind of take a position, you're going to have various school systems taking various attitudes, and you may very well have a student that in one system could just work through this just fine. But due to the administration's just thoughts, they just say, we're going to have, these kids going to spend 4 years here in high school, and if we can get them some AP courses, fine. If we can't, we think they need to stay here. I think going forward, this is something that you need to kind of work toward making some statements, making some policy statements that this is either good or this is not desirable, one or the other. I think it'd be great if your smart kids can get out of school in 3 years, and then probably those same kids would do a bachelor's degree in 3 years and just blow right through it. But at some point, they're going to gain all this time. They're going to be ready to go to work. They're not going to be 21 years old, and they're all at once. It'll hold them back rather than just emotional maturity. So I think it's something we need to bear in mind before we push this thing too far.
Okay. Rich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, certainly agree with Mr. Ayers' remarks on the 3-year going rate. Three things, though. The 27 score on the ACT, both math and English, we consulted a lot with Gary and his staff, and others, and we feel that really is a very good, a sound predictive cut point. There is, second point, there is an SAT corresponding scores, and I can't remember exactly, but they're around 600, both the math and the verbal. And then the third, obviously, I guess this is what you're getting at, the AP requirement is going to be narrowing the field in many respects as far as how many students would have access to that. But we feel we more than satisfied the spirit and the intent of the statute, and we certainly endorse what you are about to do.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. Is there a motion then we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Okay. Any further discussion, questions? Okay, very good. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll now move to the action items for final reading. The first is the Migrant Education, Title 1C, Service Delivery. David, you going to do that? Or
I didn't see Paula. She's going to hit it.
Paula, okay.
I would just add that Danelle and I have already decided we're going to thumb wrestle who gets to bring the school specs for second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm just here to answer any questions you may have on the final reading. I am pleased to let you know, though, that the change that we're proposing here with the inclusion of in-home instruction for our migrant students, specifically those who are classified as priority for service students, in this academic year, we've seen a good increase. I don't have the number with me in the number of students that we've actually been able to serve. So far, things are looking very, very good with getting the results that we hope to get.
Okay. Yeah, I assume that there's been no changes in this since
no
the first
changes.
reading. Okay. Any questions for Paula? Carolyn?
I just had a question. It talks about the contracting for the services. Have those contracts been determined yet?
What, the Migrant Education Program, with its Title 1C money, we flow that out through a contract to Tennessee Opportunity Programs, and then that organization hires, interviews, and hires the tutors, well, the in-home instructors, sorry, get the language right, that work. And that's an ongoing process because we have people come on and work and then they fall off for one reason or another, just like any work cycle. So it's an ongoing process.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Okay. Any questions here? Okay. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Teacher Preparation Program Approval Cycle. Martin, welcome.
Good morning. We brought a recommendation on second reading regarding extending the full approval cycle for our teacher preparation programs to coincide with our national accreditation partner, NCATE. A while back, NCATE has moved all of its accreditation cycles to a 7-year cycle. What that means is that all institutions that are seeking NCATE accreditation, once they achieve it, go into a 7-year cycle. Under our current procedures, it would affect 3 institutions currently. We have within our procedures a split between those institutions that seek either first-time state approval or NCATE accreditation, a 5-year cycle. Then once they achieve that first-time accreditation or approval, it would bump to a 7-year cycle. NCATE has asked all of its partner states to consider moving all of the visits, whether it's first time or continuing, to a 7-year cycle. Now, does this mean there would not be any activity between accreditation or state visit cycles? Absolutely not. There are all kinds of activities that occur between these full visit cycles. As a matter of fact, there was a conversation this week. Dr. Rhoda, Dr. Nixon, Dr. Hayburn, our assistant commissioner, talked about the issue of connecting the report card that's issued annually on the effectiveness of our teacher ed programs to program approval. And given that this is an annual report that this body is reviewing, we're going to make that direct connection. As a matter of fact, language is being developed literally as we speak to make that a viable connection. And that's just one example of the types of things that are going to occur between these full visit cycles. I'd be glad to respond to any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for Martin on the approval cycle? Okay, if not, is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Okay, any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Martin, thank you, sir. The next move to public virtual schools rule. David.
Thank you, Chair. Members, there are no changes from the first reading. I would just point out that this is in response to Public Chapter 492 from last year, which directed the State Board to promulgate any rules necessary for the operation of virtual schools. The vast majority of rules that we have that govern traditional brick-and-mortar schools also govern virtual schools, licensed teachers, state-aligned curriculum, just using the standards, testing of assessment of learning, all those sorts of things. There are some nuanced things that are peculiar to virtual schools, like the fact that they're open all the time, and how do you sort of manage that in the sort of 180-day sort of mindset. So we've created some language that allows for that. We did not do anything that runs afoul of the law that requires 180 school days. We also know that there are some interesting challenges when it comes to the enrollment and transfer of students from between districts, and so that has been addressed within these rules as well. They're the same set of rules you had an opportunity to see a few months ago, and I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions for David? Okay.
Dr. Sevier, just one quick question. I know that they follow the same accountability. It's a new growth area for us in Tennessee. How are we going to be measuring that kind of and their performance on an annual basis?
So they are a school. They receive a school number, and if you are Virtual School A, then Virtual School A is on a report card, just like my daughter's elementary school. And so they'll have to stand up side by side, and they would be subject to any of the same accolades and sanctions that might come to any other traditional school.
Okay, other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
I got it.
Sorry, Mike.
And that, this kind of transcends through a lot of things, including charter schools, and maybe even when we get into schools that receive vouchers, but also I know how the state can monitor the performance of these, for lack of a word, third-party schools, quasi-public. How does the public monitor them?
So when we're speaking about a virtual environment, we sort of have a couple of different models to look at. We have a lot of our virtual schools are run wholly and solely for the students of that district. There might be a virtual high school here in Metro Nashville that's run for the kids of Metro Nashville by Metro Nashville teachers, where we have something on the other end of that spectrum that's run for kids across the state, through an LEA, but by a third party. That school has the same school number that the Metro Nashville school I described would have, even though they're both virtual and they're subject to the same accountability. So if it's run through an LEA, that LEA is on the hook for the performance of those kids, even though they do not live within the borders of that county or city. And that's the best answer I can.
Here's where I start, and I work backwards from the consumer, and they're trying to figure out if this is a good deal for their kid, or someone who says, is this a good deal for public dollars to be spent on? And it's easier to talk about it in terms of a charter or spending voucher dollars, but I would put this in the same class. There needs to be data that is raw, and that when, in other words, not broad percentages or universal percentages, but specific to the performance of that entity. So, and in such a way that a unsophisticated consumer could look at it and say, hey, they're doing a pretty good job, or dang, dang being a technical term. And then when I make that logic, it's almost like that logic applies to any school, whether it's traditional bricks and mortar public, or there really needs to be I think we need to think through anybody who gets public dollars. There ought to be posted by a school a whole lot of data that is in raw form, that, you know, we look at the trends, and like 36%, and we're moving. But if we were to look on the statewide basis, if we were to look at the actual number of kids, raw numbers of kids, it would have a different impact on the meaning of these numbers. I think as we go into different delivery methods, we got to figure out ways to give people an idea to really understand the benefit of them, so that they can make knowledgeable decisions.
I would say that just in response to that, we don't disagree with you at all. I would say there's maybe another angle to that, in that how are we able to deliver that message to those consumers? I mean, if they want to dig into the state report card to see how the schools in that district are doing, they can. But you know, it's not always the most easily understood tool for deciding where to buy your next home.
You really got to be a somewhat sophisticated, and you got to go add you got to know what you got to take percentages and convert them into raw numbers, and a percentage looks a lot more innocuous than the raw number of kids who did not hit all 4 benchmarks at blankety blank school, virtual or otherwise. That raw, or the number who scored 19, the number scored 8. If we could get that more, you know, people's going to understand. I think people will start to understand the need for more economic support as well. It's a little bit vague now, and it looks. I don't know that this diatribe's been very germane to what we're talking about here, but I think it's important, as we do put online a whole lot of stuff, that we give people an idea of what they're buying.
Gary?
I think this is a topic that we need to continue to discuss, and I'd like to put it on their agenda for our next workshop, to spend some time around what you're mentioning.
Okay, good discussion. Okay, any further questions, comments? Okay, is there a motion that we approve on final reading? Got a motion, second? Got a second? Got a second. This requires a roll call vote. Phyllis, if you could call the roll, please.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you, David. Now move to the isolation and restraint reporting rule. And Danielle, let's go do that.
All right, we have isolation and restraint reporting rule. There's been no change since first reading. Public Chapter 457 require the State Board to promulgate rules concerning the standard reporting format for the use of isolation and restraint. And the reporting format has been developed. It'll be implemented in the coming school year. Any questions?
Questions? Motion to approve? Got a motion in a second. Any further discussion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote. Phyllis? Aye. Okay, thank you. Motion is approved. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, the next item is the charter school funding and enrollment rules. Rich.
Good morning.
Welcome.
There are no changes to this. Well, actually, there's one change to this from first to second reading, and that is just to change the date when the charter schools need to submit their projected enrollment to the district from May 1st to March 1st. And that was after consulting with the districts about when they need to prepare their budgets in the spring to get them ready to be approved by the department. But otherwise, this is the same as on first reading and mainly just incorporates the changes from statutes that were passed last spring about prepaying the local portion of the BEP funding.
Okay, any questions for Rich? Okay, is there a motion that we approve on final reading? Got a motion, second? Got a second. This requires a roll call. Phyllis, please.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion approved. Rich, thank you. Next is the high school transition policy. David.
Thank you, Chair and members. This is, again, second reading. No changes from the first reading regarding this. Clarification around the end-of-course assessments. We had a lot of discussion about this yesterday, and the fallout from that discussion is we want to make sure that whatever we do, we are giving a fair assessment to our teachers, those who have helped, everyone who's helped along the line of getting that kid to that level of proficiency or advancement, and making sure that they are able to leverage that learning, that what the teachers learned about their own teaching, really, to help improve their practice and for the mark of that school. So we've had opportunity to do that. We believe a lot of these problems go away once we move to a consortium of testing and have the opportunity to look across states and see how those issues get handled. But in the interim, between now and then, we want to make sure that students who are in a class take the assessment for the class in which they were taken and are not unduly burdened with excess testing. We've had opportunity to talk to the Division of Assessment after the workshop yesterday, and they remain committed to making sure that those achievement marks that benefit the school, benefit the educators in that school, remain there. That's both in the pre-high school years in the 8th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for those taking advanced math or other courses, and also in the other scores like AP, IB, Cambridge, and other programs you've approved that are over and above the regular traditional high school curriculum. I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions? The concern that I have expressed here is that, and certainly the commissioner echoed this yesterday in our meeting, is that we don't want to do anything here that is going to have school systems discourage kids from taking algebra and geometry if they're ready in grades 6, 7, and 8. And I think that we've got to be careful about how we let students that not take TCAP but take end-of-course tests in these subjects, how we permit that accounting to be done so that it doesn't artificially reduce the proficiency. And I guess what I would like to ask us to do is come back to the next meeting with a report on how we're going to do that. I think it's terribly important that we don't remove some way the students who are taking algebra and geometry from that population that is included in the percent proficiency, because it can really, if you take away the top 25 or 30% in some of these school systems, you go really reduce that percent proficiency unless you compensate for it in some way. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yep.
we're yet to know how we're actually going to make that adjustment, but as I understand it, there will be an adjustment that basically holds schools harmless now. For somehow or another, it would be great if we could communicate that to the school districts, because they're pretty daggum rattled by it, and so that they can say, well, we can say we don't know how we're going to get there, but you don't need to worry about it. We're going to get there, and you're going to be held harmless, so they can put that off of all the things that they're biting their nails about.
Yeah, Commissioner.
We will definitely do that, and this ties up a little bit in the state's application for a No Child Left Behind waiver, which changes the accountability system for schools as well as for school districts. And so part of this is tied up in the fact that we live in the current No Child Left Behind, adequate yearly progress rules where people are measured against this absolute standard of proficiency, rather than a growth standard, which we're trying to move towards under our waiver. And we hope that we'll have news on that in the next week or two. We will communicate with districts, and I think the communication with districts is partially about alleviating worries, but the alleviating worries is important less for generalized angst and more because of what the chairman raised and what we talked about yesterday, which is we don't want the generalized angst to lead to the unintended consequence of districts not enrolling kids in the courses that they should be enrolled in. This is a tricky one because we're ultimately balancing two unintended consequences. On the one side, the unintended consequence of potentially having districts not enroll kids where they should be enrolled. And I think the cure to that is communication about accountability. And then on the other side, the unintended consequence of the current status, which is probably over-testing of children and putting teachers in a position where they're attempting to teach to multiple standards for multiple tests in a short period of time in a way that's probably counterproductive to the learning of the kids. And so it's one of those issues where there is not a perfect answer. And in fact, districts, I think, have weighed in on both sides with us on this one. But we take it seriously. We will come back with the report. We will communicate with districts. We're going to SAS next week. We're doing a day-long trip to SAS. We'll talk to them about how this will play out through value-added scores, and I think we feel confident that we'll be able to make sure that that's resolved appropriately as well.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move to item I, the Educator Preparation Units Program Licensure Areas. Martin?
Good morning again. You have in front of you recommendations for 6 institutions that hosted visits last spring semester. Before I would entertain any questions about the specific recommendations, if you would bear with me just for a few moments just to provide a bit of context for these recommendations. I'd like to for a moment, explain the relationship of this board to the department in regard to what we're moving towards calling educator preparation, not teacher education. In effect, this board sets the policy and adopts the standards by which our programs are approved. Once those standards are established and the policy is adopted, they're turned over to the department, primarily my office, to implement the process to bring recommendations to this board for final action. Everything that occurs in this process is based upon standards. And there are really 2 big sets of standards. They're different, but they're connected. The first set of standards are what we call unit standards. These are the NCATE standards. And I brought some visual aids. This is a hard copy version of the 6 NCATE standards right here. These unit standards apply to that organized group within the teacher preparation provider, such as the College of Education, the Department of Education, whatever that entity is within the institution that delivers teacher preparation. They're overarching types of standards. The other types of standards we use are licensure standards. Pardon my voice, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Again, hard copy version. This is about a 400-page document that lists all the specific standards that we would require for someone entering and completing a program in a specialty area license. In other words, there are specific knowledge and skills that are included in these standards for anyone who would want to be an English teacher in high school, mathematics teacher, or an elementary K-6 teacher. Thank you. So they're different standards, but they're interconnected. So as we implement this approval process, we bring you recommendations for these teacher education units, as well as the licensure programs offered by these programs based upon these 2 sets of standards. So I wanted to make sure you were clear on what this relates to. In terms of our relationship with NCATE, and again, these are the 6 overriding standards. The policy that this board has adopted requires that all of our preparation programs address these standards, that they meet these 6 standards. We give the institutions the choice as to whether or not they want to seek national accreditation through NCATE or state approval. Of the recommendations that you have in front of you today, and there are 6 institutions, 4 of those institutions have opted to seek either first-time or continuing NCATE accreditation. The other the other 2 are seeking state approval only. And so it's the same standards, it's just a different entity that makes the decision about these unit standards. In terms of the variety of programs we have in our state, and it's quite well reflected in the institutions presented to you today, an example would be Aquinas College here in Nashville. A small independent institution. They offer 1 licensure program in elementary K-6. They must meet all of these 6 NCATE standards as well as those licensure program standards to have people licensed in elementary K-6. You also have on your agenda for consideration a large public institution, Tennessee Technological University in Cookeville. Same set of 6 standards, but they offer a whole long list of licensure programs. So regardless of the size of the institution, regardless of what specialty area programs they offer for licensure, they all undergo the same process. At this point, I'd be glad to respond to any questions you would have about any of the specific institutions that are being brought to you for action.
Okay, questions? Martin, I guess I'm particularly concerned about the situation at Victory. What is the situation there?
Sure. Victory University was formerly known as Crichton College in Memphis. They have gone through a change in ownership. This occurred 2009, about mid-year 2009. And there has been a great deal of transition that's occurred on that campus. I'll give you a couple of examples. From the time that the transition has taken place, there have been 3 separate presidents. When my office was first contacted about this significant change, I was interacting with one president. when the joint process occurred with NCATE during the actual on-site visit, there was another president. And since that visit that took place spring of 2011, there's been a third president. The full-time faculty in teacher preparation at that institution comprised 7 people. Of those 7 people, when we were on that campus back last spring semester, only 1 had been there more than 1 year. There were, I think, 5 additional part-time members of that faculty, all brand new people. So I guess what I'm communicating is what was in place when Crichton College was operating under state approval was a completely different scenario when a visit took place last spring on the campus of Victory University. When it was still Crichton College, that institution had applied for candidacy status with NCATE and had achieved that candidacy status. In the transition, Victory asked NCATE if they would consider honoring that candidacy status that had been achieved by Crichton, and NCATE said they would. So this visit was conducted, in effect, under a set of preconditions that were met by a much different institution. The university was given some options, and they opted to go ahead and go with what they had proposed to NCATE. We agreed to also go along with this. What we found on that campus last spring was an institution that clearly was not meeting these 6 NCATE standards, and NCATE has verified that. We defer to NCATE when an institution chooses to seek accreditation for their decision. Once they make that decision, we report that decision to you, and in this case, we felt that in this particular set of recommendations, they are so out of alignment with what we require that we could bring nothing but a denial of approval recommendation to you. The institution is well aware of this. They were given the opportunity to appeal this recommendation. They have chosen not to.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Martin.
So let me just be clear. Your recommendation is that we deny their...
That's correct.
Okay.
What we have also done within this recommendation is create a 1-year window of opportunity for any individual who's currently in the pipeline to be able to receive the license that they signed up for their program. We've operated under the principle that we do not penalize candidates who enroll in these programs because of things beyond their control. We thought it would be very fair to allow that window of opportunity to exist for, in effect, 2 semesters. So we have created that opportunity.
Are you convinced that improvements are going to be made at Tennessee Tech? It certainly appears that there's a lot of concern about their programs.
Shifting to Tennessee Tech, a bit of a different situation. There are some very serious concerns about that institution and their NCATE accreditation. They have been offered an opportunity to resolve some of these critical deficiencies and are in the process of doing so. We'll know a bit more after they present some additional information to NCATE this coming April. There will be a visit that will occur during the spring semester of 2013 to look at their advanced programs. So they're in the process of trying to address these deficiencies.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion to approve, Mike? Got a second? Got a second. Any additional questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you,
Martin.
and I
Appreciate it.
particularly thank Mr. Edwards for his assistance.
Thank you. Charter school appeal items. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Smart Schools Incorporated submitted an initial charter application to Knox County Schools on September 30th, 2011. After reviewing the application, the Knox County Schools voted to deny the charter at its regularly scheduled board meeting held November 2nd. On November 18th, Smart Schools Incorporated submitted an amended application to address the deficiencies cited in the initial application. At the December 5, 2011 special call meeting of Knox County School Board, the board voted to deny the amended application. On December 14th, an appeal to the State Board of Education was received. A hearing was held on January 11th at the Knox County Board of Education on this application. The Knox County Schools used a large committee of a variety of folks from education as well as from the community to review. They used the Department of Education scoring rubric. On the initial application, it was scored at 61.75 points out of 100, with only one area out of 4 receiving an adequate rating. On the amended application, it was scored at a 50.39, with all 4 areas, mission, education, governance, and business operations, scored inadequate, and a listing of a variety of concerns in each of the 4 areas was provided. State law requires that the State Board of Education review the decision of local boards of education to determine whether the denial of the charter was in the best interest of students and the school and the community. Approval of a charter school must be in the form of a written agreement signed by the sponsor and the charting authority, which shall be binding upon the governing body of the public charter school. Now, this means that when the local board of education votes to approve a charter, it must be ready to sign that binding document at that time, just as it would with any other contract it approved. I believe because of this important nature of this contract, it behooves the chartering authorizer and the sponsor to have clearly communicated with each other during the application process. It appears from the January 11th hearing and subsequent documentation that we've received that there was a serious lack of communication between Knox County and Smart Incorporated. Knox County contends that there was no attempt from Smart Schools to get information concerning the needs of the students, the district, and the community. Further, when invited by Knox County school officials to attend the board meeting where the application would be discussed, representatives from Smart Schools failed to attend. Smart Schools Incorporated contends that Knox County was not forthright in their scoring and noting that they were not provided with baseline score requirements for the approval of the application and the scoring sheets from the review committee. Conversely, on the initial application, they were provided a list of 40 items needing improvement, which were different from the 41 items on the amended application, making it difficult for Smart Schools to address the items that were identified. Nevertheless, Smart Schools provided no evidence that the consortium of law, a new consortium of law and business existence would be in the best interest of the students, the school district, or the community. In fact, its arguments focus solely on technicalities of the application process. And while I note that these technicalities have some validity, I do not believe that they are compelling enough to overcome the deficiencies identified by Knox County Schools. Compelling was the assertion that from Knox County that Smart Schools did not appear to know the demographics of the students, the district, as evidenced by the absence of specific data and lack of local support. I believe it's important for the sponsor to be well acquainted with the students, the district, and the community that they intend to serve in order for them to clearly show that their existence would be in the best interest of those groups. For these reasons, I do not believe that the decision to deny Smart Schools charter was contrary to the best interest of the students, the district, and the community, and therefore I recommend to you that the decision of Knox County School Board be upheld.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Questions for Gary? Any questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve upholding the decision of the Knox County school system? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Got a second? Any question, discussion? Okay, that's
Gary,
Carolyn?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask, does Knox County have any current charter schools in operation?
I believe they have one that's been approved.
Okay, other questions? Okay, this does require a roll call vote. Phyllis? Aye. thank you. Motion is approved. You might note that, you know, staff is having to spend more and more time on these charter school appeals. You know, there are obviously more charter schools being proposed, and it just seems like this is becoming a bigger and bigger job for relatively small staff. So Gary and Danielle, we appreciate the work that's going into this. But, hopefully we don't get overloaded with the ones that could be coming down the road as more and more charter schools are being proposed.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mike.
the legislature and the governor wanted a more aggressive charter school to where the state is going to entertain more and look at more, and I think that to lessen the roadblocks, and in doing so, obviously they've generated more activity, which, like you say, has generated more man hours needed by this board and particularly its staff. I really think that they, in doing so, have really created something of a budget impact on us that we need to make a effort to staff up if we're going to handle that load that they wanted generated.
I think it's a good point, and it's certainly one that we're going to have to address with the projections that are out there. I think it's a significant issue. Okay. Other comments? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would just, two things. One is, I think that's right. I think there are going to be many, many more that are coming up. And it's a function, it's important to remember, though, that it's a function of two things. It's both opening the window, but it's also a function of districts' willingness to engage openly with charter schools and help work with charter schools so that they never reach the point of the appeal process. And I think we all know that there are some districts that are much more welcoming of charter schools than others. And this is not a commentary on this one at all. This is a broad commentary. And I think one thing that we'll all need to be cognizant of, particularly as we see scores come in, and I've talked to state board staff about this, and we're all on the same page about this, but a score done by a school system is not in and of itself really evidence of much of anything. Different systems, based on their perspective on charter schools and their willingness to work with them, will score the same application in very, very different ways, and we just need to be cognizant of that piece as well.
Good.
But that really takes a lot of man hours to grade the school district's papers.
Okay, other comments? I think that, you know, we've got a storm cloud out there on the horizon that we need to recognize, and sure we'll have to deal with appropriately. Okay, let's move to the teacher license actions. Danielle?
Bringing up the rear. You all have a list of proposed actions for the individuals in your packet. Are there any questions about these?
Okay, questions about the proposed actions on teacher licensure? I think we need to, again, remind the board and the audience that the staff spends a lot of time looking at these and comparing the recommended action to other actions that have been taken to the various rules and regulations that we're working with. And I think they do a fantastic job of making sure that we're being consistent in our license actions. Any questions for Danielle on any of the proposed actions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve the proposed teacher license actions? Got a motion? Got a second? Got a second? Any questions? Okay, this requires a roll call vote. Phyllis? Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Okay, this gets us to the end of our agenda. Rich, any comments you have to any parting shots?
Not a parting shot, but we certainly appreciated the joint meeting yesterday afternoon and everyone's participation in that. And we obviously enjoy working with the commissioner and with Gary on any aspect we can where we all come together.
Great. Commissioner, any parting shots? Okay, good. Gary?
I'd just like to say that I was really encouraged by the reports of the programs that we had yesterday at the joint meeting. There's some wonderful things unfolding out there in our schools, and both at the K-12 and the post-secondary campuses.
Great. Well said. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Let me remind you of our meetings for the remainder of this year. April the 20th, July the 27th, and October the 19th. We will follow our normal process. We'll have a workshop the day before those meetings, but those are the Friday meetings that we've got for the remainder of this year. Certainly appreciate everybody's involvement, participation. Meeting is adjourned.